You know, I've been seeing a lot of people say that this is independent or indie. This show is so indie, as well as the whole indie fatigue being thrown about here and there haphazardly. Kind of like how Sonic fans run jokes into the ground. It's just exhausting and just is everywhere and just loses its luster after the 5 or 10 times, you know? Personally, indie is kind of a muddied word nowadays. Like, people still say that glitch is, indie, but is that really the case? And a lot of people on the other side say yes, and the other side says no because they got that government money. But I'm here to just kind of clear the air on that notion because I've been thinking about this topic a lot ever since a lot of people criticizes glitch for not being independent, given by a lot of its fans saying that they are, and that is understandable. So I do hope that this kind of clears the air on what I think is the right term to use when talking about glitch as well as actual creatives and stuff. But it's more complicated than I think both sides understand it, I would say. Basically, glitch, if you think about it, is now not really independent, mostly because of the Australian government giving them money, or like them being sponsored by Japan itself, putting in stores in Japan and catering to that market. But if you think about it, back in the old days of Glitch, when it was first starting off, technically they were independent. It's just that I believe the nexus point of when they became not independent anymore is due to the Australian government or and I guess Epic Games themselves giving them money, you know? And that's a reasonable argument, I would say. But that surely isn't all of the case, right? No. Because if you think about it hard enough, they're not really catering to the government's needs or anything. They just kind of got their money and just bagged it so that they can support themselves in order to support their creatives through merchandise and spread of word of mouth and whatnot. And also TDAC is is it independent? Yes and no. Because the Amazing Digital Circus's popularity was is kind of a lightning in a bottle, and I think Glitch knows this because again, they're not specifically doing anything to censor or like hinder the Amazing Digital Circus's production line. I mean, they do censor the swears, but I'd argue that is mostly because of the fact that originally they weren't allowed supposed to swear that much, given that they don't really have a bottle for that point. And if they were allowed to swear, and if they were more than capable, which I'd argue that they were more than capable at that point, then yeah, I guess independent isn't really the right term for glitch then. Personally, I think more people need to do their own research and specifically state that Glitch technically is a double A studio. Not as financially stable as Disney, but not as independent as like a one person game developer on Steam. But a double A studio, somewhere in the middle, where they they do need merch sales in order to stay afloat, as well as keep their creatives in creative lining and control. And and personally, and personally, I think it's only a matter of doing the proper research and not mislabeling them as such a thing as independent because they're they're much more well endowed and not being independent, you know? And this goes for the other side too, saying that, oh, yes, this video is validating my opinion. Because you being indie fatigued is also kind of a false statement in of itself, because you also play a lot of AA studios as well as AAA stuff too, as well as will regard them. That's why you're watching this video. So, why this whole conflict then? Why this whole conflict? I say it's a matter of perspective and the fact that a lot of people are just fed up and tired of labeling things wrong. Oh, a stranger is saying that this thing that I never really cared for is this independent. You're wrong. I'm not defending Glitch or anything or any AA studio. I'm just I'm just trying to create a term that best suits studios like Glitch, where they're not exactly independent, but they're not AAA, you know? That's why I came up with the AA system. Like, Sega is pretty big AA. A big AA studio, I would say. While Glitch, I would say, falls right underneath Sega, and right underneath Glitch, I would say, is Expedition 33 Studio, where originally they they were just a small team of ex-developers from Ubisoft that created something very much a lightning in a bottle. Or, I guess, in a much more clearer sense, Studio MDHR of Cuphead fame. They are a smaller AA studio, right? I'd argue, given the grueling task that they had to do in order to animate and hand draw all the characters in Cuphead, I'd argue that without the help of Microsoft spreading awareness to them, they wouldn't have made it to begin with, as well as the many mortgages that they filed in, because, dude, Jesus Christ. The more that I think about it, I think a lot of the subcategories and the labels of these types of studios need to mostly be categorized, I would say. Because it's gonna get to a point where everyone is gonna label everything independent. Insert syndrome quote here. And I'm not here trying to make fun of these studios either, because again, I just want to highlight the fact that Yacht Club Games is smaller AA, right? So why the heck are they saying that if Mina the Hollower doesn't hit their sales, they're gonna go bankrupt? Is that because of the fact they're independent or AA? Like, if a one-man team fails a game, and if a one-man independent person and or creative doesn't make his sales, would they still go on? Maybe. I'd argue yes, they would still keep on going. So, how about Team Cherry? You know? That's a small person group that took their sweet time in developing Silksong because of how much fun that they were having. Are they labeled as independent because of that? I'd argue yes, because of the fact that they took their time and still kept on going after Hollow Knight was successful. Yacht Club Games technically maybe is still independent, but it's muddied that way because they are probably acting like a company now thinking about it. But again, they're not as financially stable as something like, Disney, Glitch, Sega. So what is it, and what is independent? what truly is independent anymore in that case? You tell me. Again, Yacht Club Games was funded by people on Kickstarter. Does that make them independent? Yes. They don't have any backing for any government or studio other than themselves and the community. Potentially. So, what I'm trying to get at here is that it's a lot more complicated than people give credit for, and I feel like a lot of people, while talking about this, doesn't really talk about the creative struggles and the hardships that these creatives, these people, go through in order to get their stuff out there in the public in the first place. Like, I really want to stress the fact that these are creatives and people that just want to make things for other people to enjoy. And we should actually be supporting actual creative people and talented individuals that got to where they are because of the fact that they just kept on going and never gave up. Let's not support AAA gosh darn studios that keeps on making layoffs every year, which is very saddening. Let's not celebrate the fact that the company is the reason why these things get made and why they're good. It's these teams of amazing creative people that are the reason why that these things are so good. So, is Glitch truly an independent studio? No question mark? No. I'd argue. Is Team Cherry or Deltarune independent? Again, a smaller independent group of people made those things, made Silksong and Deltarune possible. Again, just do your research, I would say. Is one-man teams on Steam that are mostly making games free to play or at a cheap price made by one person independent? Of course. Of course. Since they're associated with Steam, does that make them smaller AA or small groups of creatives then? No. Again, it's up to you. I say that we start labeling AA studios pertaining to not AAA studios the way that we define games, where smaller AA studios like MDHR with Cuphead is that a smaller studio, AA studio, and a AA studio for animation shows should be Glitch. It should be labeled. Glitch should be labeled as AA, I would say. Something like that, you know? Like independent, AA, AAA, you know? Smaller AA, high AA, small AAA, high AAA, small indie, high indie, middle indie. I don't know if that'll work out in the long run, but it's just something to think about, I would say. Yep. Thank you for watching me ramble. This is yet another unscripted video, and I just wanted to get my thoughts across on this whole debate about indie fatigue. Man, people will just add fatigue on anything, which I understand, but yowzers. But I do understand ultimately, and if you don't want to like something that you supported, then that's good too. Again, support creatives, whether it is that you like them or don't like them. Because you're a person. They're people too, not faceless shareholders or laundering money schemes from other government agencies. This is Metal, signing off. I hope you all go and support Mina the Hollower, because they really need all the support that they can get, as well as individuals on Steam putting their games out there for free or at a cheap price. Have a nice day, y'all.